So tonight, I want to begin with a question. How great is your God? That's the question. That might seem like an odd question, especially in a gathering like this, but your answer to that question affects every area of your life. How great is your God? It determines the quality of your life, the burdens you carry, the anxiety levels that you experience, the contentment that you have with just life in general. It affects every instance of your relationships, all of your relationships, the level of conflict or harmony you have in them, that need to dominate that interaction to get the result that you're looking for, the willingness to give God room to work in the life of the other person. And then it defines your very trajectory of your life, your pursuits versus your calling. Are you building your kingdom? Are you building God's kingdom? It affects gaining temporary rewards versus the rewards that never fail. So every area of your life is affected by the answer to that question. How great is your God? It's a very important question for each of us to wrestle with, and it is wrestling, and we all will wrestle with that question. How great is my God? I think most of us would say God's great. We would say it without giving it even another thought. And Scripture tells us that, in fact, God is great. It tells us this definitively in Deuteronomy 10:17. It says, "For the Lord your God is God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God." And it also tells us that God is great intuitively. In Romans 1:19 and 20, it says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made." So Scripture tells us that God is great. But the real issue for us is getting beyond the words that God is great, our agreeing that God is great, and getting to the reality of our actions every day about God being great. And the question that I asked myself as I was preparing this is, do I live like I fully believe that God is great? Do I surrender my will to His in every area of my life, or do I exercise my will while disregarding His? Do I trust Him to steer me through all the circumstances of my life each day, or do I let Him ride along as some kind of a plan B insurance policy just in case my plan A doesn't quite work out? Do I step aside and let Him fight my battles in those difficult situations with an unjust authority or an unkind person? Or do I automatically strike back at the one who's trying to take advantage of me or mistreating me? Do I really believe that His plans for me are the best that are possible? Or do I let my preferences creep in and control my actions each day? Do I carry the burden of making sure that His kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, is built on earth? Or do I find my place in His plan and just enjoy helping however, whenever, and wherever He asks me to help? I don't know about you, but there's a lot of times when I just don't live like I fully believe that God is great. And I really, really don't like it when that happens. I don't like it, but I do realize that this type of surrender is a lifelong pursuit. It's not something that just happens. It's this pursuit of me aligning myself wherever God is and getting involved with what He's doing. So tonight, I'd like to take a little time to review some of the details about the God who created everything around us, the universe. And as I do, I'm hopeful that these examples will encourage you to relax your grip on life, trying to wrestle it, control it, and make it go where you want to go, and just rest in His hands and trust Him to take you where He wants you to go. Let's begin with the vastness of God's being. It's hard to understand God, all right? But there are at least 20 attributes that can help us know something about God, and here's just a few of them. Eternal. So we know that God's eternal, but have you ever pondered what it means, that word means to us mortals? See, we're creatures of time and space. Our reality exists only within the framework of the universe around us. We can't understand things beyond that. So we can quickly grasp concrete things like time and distance and mass, and we can take the input from our five senses and we can analyze all of those things. Why? Because they're associated with our reality. But when we get into something as abstract as eternity, it's more difficult. Why? Because it's disassociated from our reality. So it's difficult. There's no yardstick or experience to mentally index and process what eternity is. You can't. For instance, I'll give you an example. We always think of eternity as this long, extended period of time. But time does not exist in eternity. Time is senseless in eternity. Because how do you measure something that is without a beginning and without an end? Time can't measure it. So God is eternal. God was always, He is always, and He will be always. He already existed in the beginning. In Genesis, in the beginning, God created heaven. He already existed before that. The best that any created being in the entire universe can be is half eternal, because everything that was created had a beginning, but not God. He's immutable. If you think about our lives, our life is one process of continuous change. Seasons come and go. We're born, we age, we die. There's new technology that replaces old technology. Today's hot trend is old news tomorrow. And there's no reliability in that kind of an environment of change. There's no reliability because things are always on the move. Every time you think you've got your handle on it, it changes again on you. But God is immutable. He never changes. Why? Because He cannot change. He is already perfect. He stands steadfast in the midst of all of our turbulent lives, and He alone is reliable when everything else will fail. Everything we see will roll up one day and burn up. Everything will fail. God's incomprehensible. Mankind has is always on this quest to know more and more and more. We see knowledge as power, but yet compared to God, our knowledge is overwhelmingly insignificant. God is incomprehensible. Our minds cannot even fathom the meaning of I am that I am. So God is without size, He's without weight, He's without age, He's without any finite measure that we deal with our physical reality with. Okay? But even so, even the scriptures do not try to prove God's existence. They don't. They just merely assume that it is so. Omnipotent. We are all easily overwhelmed by circumstances. You know, there's a sickness that I wasn't expecting. There was an accident. There was an acquisition of my company with another one. There was a financial issue. There was a policy change that changes the whole game for us. But God is omnipotent. He is fully powerful. He's all powerful. He possesses the ability, the authority, and the unlimited power to accomplish whatever he wants to accomplish. History is not a random series of events like many people think. It unfolds according to God's plan. And we see this over and over in Scripture. He raises up kings and tears them down. He appoints the time, the place, and the boundaries for every people group and every nation. He transforms hearts of stone into hearts of flesh. Nothing is too hard for him. He's omnipresent. We can only exist in one place at one time, the same as every other created thing in the universe. But God is omnipresent. He's exempt from every dimension and every constraint of creation. He's fully present everywhere, but yet he's distinctly apart from everything. So what does that mean to us? God is unavoidable. There's no place you can go that he isn't. We can ignore him, but he's still there. And then he's omniscient. We have imperfect knowledge about everything. All of our thoughts are tainted by preconceptions and biases and prejudices, but God is omniscient. He has nothing to learn. There's nothing outside of his purview of knowledge. Okay? He knows all that is actual, all that is possible within this fleeting realm that we call time, both in the past, in the present, and in the future. God's sovereign. Most of us don't like chaos. We like that feeling of continuity. We like that feeling of predictability. Yet, think about it. What can we really control? What can we control? God's sovereign. He's in total control. Nothing can thwart his purposes. He's never caught by surprise. He exercises divine control over all that is and all that ever will be. And if you think about it, he's the only one that can corral that seeming randomness of mankind's collective free will and funnel it to where history completes on his timeline. Let's move on to the vastness of God's designs. In the endless details of creation, we can clearly see God's greatness and we can discern his ability to sustain us. So let's look at some of these pieces of the things that he's designed. Earth. Earth is just right for life to thrive. It's suspended the perfect distance from the sun. If we were a few percent closer to the sun, temperatures would careen out of control. If we were a few percent farther away, this would be an ice-filled wasteland. In either situation, life could not exist here. And let's talk about the angle of tilt. You know, we rotate on the axis, and that axis tilt is optimal. It gives us a seasonal variability, and it also maximizes the available global habitat. Talk about the atmosphere. It's robust and sustainable. It protects us from a lot of things: solar radiation, cosmic rays, meteors. The pressure of that atmosphere is the only reason that we have liquid water. And it's the only reason that anything can fly. Air currents that occur in the atmosphere take concentrations of pollution and carbon dioxide and oxygen and mix them all together, constantly stabilizing our weather and our climate. And then speaking of liquid water, that is a unique feature to this planet, liquid water. It's made from two elements, hydrogen and oxygen. Both of them are combustible, but when they're combined together into this thing called water, it can extinguish combustion, right? It's amazing. The large bodies of water on the earth, they regulate our temperature. Sometimes they release heat, sometimes they absorb heat, but it keeps things in some kind of rhythm on earth. And then water, even for us to live, it makes possible the transmission of nutrients and minerals into the cell and waste product from the cell. It is an amazing thing, water. And here's one that most people don't ever consider, the magnetic field. It makes navigation possible. We kind of understand that. You know, we have the ability to use a compass. The birds use the magnetic field, insects use magnetic field, and sea creatures use it to get to from one point to the other. But even more important, it shields us from this harmful radiation that comes from outer space, mostly from the sun, and this stuff called solar wind, which are streams of charged particles from the sun. And it's interesting, the planets that don't have a magnetic field have lost their entire atmosphere to solar wind. It's gone. And we see them in our own solar system. So let's talk about the different life forms on Earth. Okay, we have plant life. Plants were the first living things that God created. They're found on every continent, in every environment. And they range in size from the tiny phytoplankton to the mighty redwoods. And we think of plants as this simple life form that just grows, right? But plants are amazing. They can convert light to chemical energy, and in that process, they convert carbon dioxide to oxygen. And they're masters at water adhesion and cohesion, bringing water from the roots to the leaves. A single giant redwood tree pumps about 500 gallons a day up 300 feet. That's 4,200 pounds of water every day. It's amazing. And plants aren't as stupid as we give them credit for being. They communicate with each other by secreting chemicals. They react to sound. Their roots can detect water sources and grow toward them. They sense gravity, so they know which way is up and which way is down. And they know day from night and season from season. Then we have aquatic life. All the water systems on the earth have this vast diversity of aquatic life. And like plants, we don't associate high levels of intelligence with the things that live in the water around us. But many of them are remarkable. We know that they can be trained. We know that they can remember past experiences. We know they can use tools. We know that they can recognize human individuals. And we know that they can navigate using landmarks under the water or the magnetic fields. And then we have the terrestrial life, the life above the water. Airborne life was the first terrestrial life created by God. So we had birds and bats and flying reptiles and insects. And these creatures all have special design features that allow them to fly. They have nearly hollow bones. They have perfectly centered body mass, so they're not tilting this way or tilting this way. They have flapping wings that can either change the shape of their airfoil or can rotate in different patterns so they can hover. I think sometimes we forget it's only been a little over a century since we learned how to fly, the Wright brothers, right? And that came only after years of study and experimentation. But yet these airborne creatures know nothing about physics. They know nothing about aerodynamics. They've never had any training, and we look up and they're flying around. It's amazing. Then we have the land animals. Each of these are design marvels in their own right. An elephant's trunk, for instance, contains 40,000 muscles. The human body contains 600. Yet that baby elephant, minutes after it's born, knows how to use that trunk. The giraffes have special valves in their jugular veins, and they have this network of blood vessels right behind their brain that keeps their heads from exploding when they bend down to drink water and all that blood rushes to their head. Lizards change color by either altering the distribution of their pigment cells or by manipulating these tiny cells that have crystals in them to change colors. And then we see mountain goats. Even the little ones defy gravity every day, and they can almost climb up a sheer cliff. And then there's humans. The first man and woman were not just one of the many things that God created. They were the focus. They were the objective of creation. And if you just look at the human body alone, the brain has over 80 billion neurons and trillions of connections. Even though our brain is not the largest, it's the most complex of anything that's ever been created. Nerve impulses travel at 170 miles an hour through your body. Your nose can distinguish trillions of different scents. The surface area of your lungs is the same size as a tennis court. It's just incredible. Your mouth produces a liter of saliva each day. And there are trillions of cells in the body, and every type has a different function. The average adult has over 60,000 miles of blood vessels that can go around the earth 2.5 times in one body. And though mankind shares many similar design elements with the other parts of God's creation, we're very different from them because of one aspect, and that is we're created in His image and His likeness. So now let's turn our eyes outward a little bit. Let's talk about our solar system. The sun, the center of our solar system, makes up an astounding 99.8% of the total mass of the solar system. Why is that important? Because that keeps everything, all the planets, all the space junk, all the debris spinning in our solar system. And even more astounding, the sun powers almost all of the life-giving systems on Earth. And they estimate that it's 130 trillion horsepower of energy each day from the sun that hits the Earth. And our moon is not to be set aside. It's larger with respect to the size of our planet than any of the other moons are with respect to their planets. So it's relatively large. And why is that important? Because that gravitational pull helps keep our axis of rotation steady, which also stabilizes our climate. Let's go out into the universe. The universe is that great expanse that Genesis talks about, above the earth. The Milky Way is our galaxy. It contains 100 billion stars. Now, we get jaundiced with these billions and trillions numbers, right? But here is reality. It would take us 31.7 years to count to 1 billion, one number per second. 31.7 years to get to a billion. In the observable space that we've been able to see and detect, we know there are between 200 billion and 2 trillion Milky Ways out there. It's astounding. And that vastness of space beyond our planet is so incomprehensible. We can talk about it, but we hardly can even conceive of it. In fact, it's so large that distance measurements in terms of miles are nonsense. So we have everything measured in light years. The distance that light travels in 1 year. And light travels fast, 186,000 miles per second. 186,000 miles per second. That's how fast light travels. In 1 light year, it travels 5.9 trillion miles. So now you start getting a scale of the distances out there. It would take us 187,000 years to count to 5.9 trillion miles, 1 count per second. But that's the distance of a light year. The closest star other than the sun is 4.25 light years away. The most distant star that we've detected is 28 billion light years away. So take 28 billion and multiply that by 5.9 trillion, you're going to have a big number. It's just, you can't even comprehend that. But God, the God of large things, is also the God of small things. Everything large is made from small building blocks. We call them atoms. Everything we physically experience in this life are composed of atoms. And atoms combined, we get molecules like oxygen, we get compounds like table salt. But if that's not astounding enough, these atomic building blocks are made from even smaller subatomic particles. We have electrons, we have protons, we have neutrons. And the protons and neutrons are made from even smaller particles called quarks and gluons. And the amazing truth about atoms is that they are mostly empty space. So for instance, it's been said if you took an aircraft carrier and you compressed all the space out of the atoms, all the space between the atoms, it would be the size of a golf ball. But it would still weigh 100,000 tons. Yet, when we walk on the deck of that aircraft carrier, it's solid when the atoms go back to where they're supposed to be. And finally, there are physical laws that govern how all of this works and keeps working. We know them, and you probably are familiar with some of them. Newton's law of motion and gravity, the laws of thermodynamics, Pascal's law of pressure, Ohm's law of electric current, Archimedes' principle of buoyancy, Bernoulli's principle of fluid speed and pressure differential, Pasteur's law of biogenesis, life only comes from life, Boyle's law of gas volume, Coulomb's law of electromagnetic force. We don't think about it, but when God, in day one, when He created the heavens and the earth, He also created all of these physical laws so that everything would work together. And then it took us centuries to discover them, what they were, how they were, and what it meant to us. So in conclusion, God is great. He's great. The entire universe shouts this out to any one of us who will listen. God is great. He's greater than all of our efforts at self-sufficiency. He's greater than our bubbles of security that we've created. He's greater than our plans and our methods. And He's greater than even our very understanding of life. So here's the question. Maybe it's time to place your future firmly in His hands and step fully into His vastness. He is able and He's ready. He can be trusted with every detail in your life.